Hi everyone and welcome back for a new video. As you remember, last week we worked on a NestJS project in which we created a user service which simply used a user array to register those users. Today we're going to go ahead and see how we can actually remove this user array, and we're going to use a DynamoDB client to use this. We're going to use Amazon DynamoDB for this. All I'm going to say today is that although I'm using NestJS as a backend for the controller, routing, etc., everything of this applies to any NodeJS backend in which you want to connect to DynamoDB. This is not a specific tutorial about how to design a table with DynamoDB. Actually, do not follow what I'm doing. In terms of if you have to implement it for real, you need to probably follow a real tutorial on how to create a table on DynamoDB following certain rules on table design. Anyway, that said, let's go ahead and let's do it. So what I'm gonna need first of all, I need to install a couple of packages, which are AWS Client DynamoDB and AWS SDK Lib DynamoDB, which is gonna make the interaction with DynamoDB way easier thanks to functions such as marshalling, etc. So let's go ahead, and our packages have been installed. The second thing I'm going to use is I'm going to use local stack, which is going to make my development way easier because I don't actually need AWS backend. So let's get started by creating a model file and a client. So what we're gonna do now, we're gonna create a new folder, database, and we're going to put a client.ts in which we're going to define our client file, in which is the file that actually is going to make the is going to connect to the database for real. So let's get started creating this client, and we need to import first of all a couple of libraries from DynamoDB, from the libraries we just installed from Amazon DynamoDB, and those are the DynamoDB client, which is from client DynamoDB, and then we're gonna need the DynamoDB document client instead, which instead comes from lib DynamoDB. Alright, now we can actually create our client with our configuration. Now I'm gonna use local stack. If you guys haven't watched my previous video about local stack, I invite you to do so, unless you have an Amazon database. So the reason why I suggest you to use the local stack is because it is actually easy to use. It's in your local, you don't need any credit card to register, no, you don't have any 12 months trial. There are some feature plan that you can actually use. However, it's free to use. I'm gonna leave it a link in the description below if you are interested. So the endpoint is gonna be localhost 4566, which is where our DynamoDB is running. So let's run local stack, which I think in the meantime I deleted my own Docker image for it, so I actually need to re-download it. So I'm gonna see you back at the end of the installation of local stack. Okay, so while local stack gets installed, we can go ahead and we can actually create our document client. So our document client is a DynamoDB document client from the Dynamo client that we created above, and it's also going to be our export default from the client file. Export default.client. But I'm going to just call it client everywhere because it is what it is. It's the client that allows us to talk with the DynamoDB client. Okay, so Dynamo, let's create our model file. So I'm going to create a folder inside my database folder. I'm going to create a folder users and then model, which is the creation of the table for our user. So let's create it as users model.ts. Okay, let's create the params for our table. This table should be of type create table command from client DynamoDB. Okay, and now we're gonna put the name of the table and which one are the different keys that we need to use. In this case, I'm gonna keep things very simple. I'm gonna have just a pk for partition key, sk as a sort key. Actually, I realized that the type that I'm using here, the create table command, doesn't have this table name, and the reason is that create table command is not the correct type. The type that I need to use is a create table input. So I'm gonna change this very quickly, and then we are good to go ahead. So let's replace it. Create. So it's a create table command input. Create table input. And we have the create table command. And now we just have to send the command as a new create table command. And the input is of course the object we've just created. Then we need the client, which is not getting imported because I've used a different variable. So import the client from /client. Okay, so now we do client.send. And here we're gonna have our command. And then we're gonna see the result, which should be a status code 200. I'm just gonna console log the result. Gonna add a catch just in case I made any mistakes in the definition of the table. However, I don't expect any mistakes because I pretty much copy pasted the example from the Amazon documentation. So we need to run NestJS, that those files actually get compiled to JavaScript. So I'm inside the dist database users table, and I have my model.javascript compiled. So I can actually run model.js, and as you can see, this has been created inside my DynamoDB instance within local stack. Okay, so we have our table created. We have all the different parameters, exactly like if it was an Amazon backend to take care of it. So what's the next bit we need to do? We need to run some operations. I'm gonna start with a put operation. The put in DynamoDB offers to do both, offers to do insertion and update. So let's get started with this one. As a primary key, I'm just gonna use a simple string such as users, simply because this is just an example. I'm not gonna need to use this table for a single table design. So I'm just gonna keep it simple. Primary key is user, secondary key is just gonna be the ID of the user, so that everything we've done so far can be actually kept easily. However, if you were to do single schema design, you need to do it properly. And now we're gonna put the other parameters coming from users, such as the name, surname, age, and email to match my model. Okay, the next bit is to actually send the command to our client. So we need to once again import the client from ./client as we did for our model, and then we're gonna send the command. So our command is gonna be a put command coming from lib.dynamodb. Make sure the import is actually from lib.dynamodb, or this won't work. And then we're gonna put user params, and then we're simply gonna return client.send command. We're simply gonna return what's returned from this command, and we should actually be able to get like a 200. And all we have to do now is to export default, put user, and then make use of it inside of our service file. So we opened our service file, and what we have to do now is to remove the insertion of a new user inside the user array, but use the put user method that we've just created. So in the put user, we're going to insert the user we create in the line above, and we're going to remove the one that refers to the array, and we're simply going to return the ID. The next bit is to try this out and to open Postman to check that this one actually works as we expect. However, to make sure that everything works, we also need to scan the table. So I'm going to add a get users method just quickly, which is going to do a scan of the table. It's going to scan the entire table. The parameters is going to be of a scan command input, and we're going to put table name, essentially just the table name, because that's all we care about. You can also put a limit and an offset. However, at this stage we only gonna have a few records, so we don't need to set any of those. Let's keep things simple. Our command is a new scan command coming from in this case has to make sure that it comes from lib DynamoDB, or it won't work. Well, for a simple case it will, but you need to make it sure that it's coming from lib DynamoDB so that everything works fine. So get users, get user params, and you're going to return we need to import client, which is not getting imported, so we need to import it manually. Client.send command, and then I'm going to simply import client, and then export default get users. Okay, let's go back to our service. This is our get user method. What we actually have to do is to get users from db users get users, and this is everything. So let's open Postman and let's try this out. So I've opened Postman and I'm gonna insert myself. So there you go. If I do a send, I get back my own ID of the insertion. Now if I do a get, I should actually be able to find myself. On a real case scenario, you will just return the items and use the other metadata to define any errors, to check for errors, etc. Let's try to post a second user to our system to make sure that everything actually works fine. All the users are returned on the at the get request. So we get Bob. Let's do a get, and there you go. Bob is getting our values return correctly. So now all we have to do to finish this example is to make an update, to make update work, get a single user and delete a user. So since we have a put, which as I said before works for both cases, insertion and update in DynamoDB, I'm gonna first of all implement the update method in my controller. So let's open back our user service. The update method user, as you can see, is trying to get the user by checking the new item. I was getting the array, doing a merge, but in this case we're just gonna provide all the items so that if any one is required, it's just gonna be deleted if you want, for example, to remove the email address. And all we have to do is to do a put user with the new user with all the parameters. And simply because our sort key is going to be the ID of the user, this is going to be substituted correctly. As you can see, put is the verb that we need to use. So let's take Bob's ID. We're gonna do a put, and we're gonna do surname, edit, send. Everything seems to be okay. Let's do a get. Let's remove these parameters because we haven't used it yet. And there you go, the surname is back edited correctly. The next method that we're gonna do is the get user. So let's go ahead and let's create a new file called getuser.ts under our database folder. And this one is going to be a simple lookup where we're going to look up for a primary key of users and a secondary key equal to the user ID, which is coming from the URL itself. So this is a simple get operation. We could actually go ahead, use a user, and then pick simply the ID of the user. So for example, pick user, and then we're gonna say I just want the ID object. However, I want to keep all the parameters simple. We could do this way. In real life, I do this way usually. I say I have an user object, I just take this parameter from it, but in this case I'm gonna keep things very simple, so that you don't have to worry about complicated TypeScript parameters. So we have get user parameters, which is of type get command input. The key are going to be, as you know, the primary key is simply users or user, and secondary key is of type user.id in this case. And then, as before, we need to take the command, which is a new get command, which we pass the get user params, and we return the await of the command.send, sorry, client.send, okay, of the command. And now we can go back and export default get user. Okay, let's go back to our service and let's put this one in use. Actually, since here I'm getting an ID, I'm gonna change the method to just use an ID instead. So get user from my method, and I'm gonna pass in just the ID. I'm gonna change the type from user to simply an ID. So get user is not a user anymore, it's an ID, and it's gonna be of type string. String with lowercase s, of course. Okay. And here we're gonna change it for ID. Okay, that's it. So now we can go ahead and test out this method if it works, which should. Let's make it return an unwrapped response. So it's actually gonna return a promise. It's completely unnecessary, to be honest, at this stage to use an async and await to just return a promise. Okay, so we get our users. Let's get Bob by its own ID. So let's copy and let's paste it in here. And there you go. What's wrong? Let's go back to the code to figure it out. Our get user everything looks okay. Maybe I'm not too sure what I'm doing wrong. Maybe I've used the wrong primary key. Table name is users, primary key is users, all uppercase. So let's copy paste the value into the get user method. Let's go back to Postman. Let's check if it actually works. And now it is working fine. As you can see, I'm returning Bob correctly. So we can go ahead and work on the next method, which is missing, which is delete. It should be the last item that we need to do. This object here, the metadata, as I said, usually you don't need to return it. You use it in the backend to do checks and then display messages in case of error. So let's do the deletion. So we need to create one last file, which is delete user. The concept you got it. It's pretty much the same as get user. However, the type of command is gonna be a delete command input and a delete command and it's gonna send a delete command to the client. So let's fast forward so that you guys don't get bored. Just gonna pretty much copy paste the code from get user. So created the delete user command, and all it's missing here is to return to use this method by providing it with the ID. So gonna delete user, not this one, but I believe I'm not exporting the file. This is not being picked. No, I'm not returning the file, so export default delete user. Default, not default. Default, okay. Go back to the service, delete user should be picked, there you go. And we pass through the ID, and that's it, done. Also, the get user by ID is unnecessary, so we can just get rid of it. Let's see if we can do some more cleanup. I think I still have the array at the top of the file. Just have to remove it. There you go. Let's go back on Postman. Let's do our get. If it still works, yes. Let's do a delete. Okay, let's get again this user. We should get nothing. Exactly, there are no rows that match, so 0. And if we get all of them, we should get just myself. Alright, so that's everything for today, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you guys understood that all of this that I've done under the database folder, although I've used NestJS project, is actually platform independent, so can be applied to any Node.js project. If you want to look at NestJS more in detail, have a look at my previous video. And about local stack, there are another 2 videos. I'm gonna link both in the description below. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, please leave a thumbs up, and see you in the next time. Bye bye.